Thank you very much. Issue number 3, the 21st Century Project.
Yes. The State Controller's Office requests 40 positions and $14.6 million for a one-year limited term in 2013-14 to support efforts resulting from the recent suspension of the MyCalPACE project. The work in 2013-14 will focus on 2 major efforts. First, payroll reconciliation and cleanup for the time period in which MyCalPACE was live. And second, supporting legal efforts against SAP so that the SCO can continue to pursue every contractual and legal option available to hold SAP accountable for its failed performance and to protect the interests of the state and its taxpayers. There is a large swing of money at stake in these legal efforts. It could range from the state paying $53 million to SAP to the state recovering 150% of the contract amount, or $134 million. In February 2013, the state terminated the contract with SAP, the system integrator for the MyCalPACE system, for failure to meet contractual commitments. As a result of terminating the contract with SAP, the SCO successfully migrated all employees back to legacy payroll, beginning with the February 2013 master pay. Considerable work required to stabilize all aspects of payroll for these employees has begun and will continue into 2013-14. Because of the significant volume of errors during the 8 months of MyCalPACE payroll, the SCO has undertaken an effort to ensure all employees were paid accurately, that all executed interfaces contained correct payroll-related information. Equally important, validation efforts are underway to ensure all vendors, both inside the state and external, are provided the appropriate documentation to support payments made to them from the MyCalPACE system. The staff recommendation today is to not fund the legal activities against SAP. The SCO would like to go on record that not funding this legal effort places significant financial risk on the state of California. Based upon contractual requirements, and because the state rightfully terminated the contract with the system integrator for cause, the SCO is obligated to engage in legal activities to defend the state's position. As previously stated, not adequately funding these efforts means that the state is at risk of not recovering any losses from SAP, up to $134 million. And should the state not be funded for resources to prove we terminated the contract for cause, we will be liable to pay SAP up to $53 million. The SCO has required and ensured that the 21st Century Project have dedicated oversight since day one. Oversight to date has come from multiple sources, including independent verification and validation, IVNV, through external contract, independent project oversight consultants, or IPOC, through the CTA, as well as an active independent steering committee. Regarding the staff recommendation to fund an assessment instead of legal efforts, from the day that the controller terminated the contract with SAP, the SCO has and continues to support an independent assessment as outlined within the LAO's analysis. And in fact, the SCO included an independent assessment as a key step in its go-forward strategy detailed in previous discussions. We also, however, acknowledge the administration's real concerns with moving forward with an independent assessment at the same time as legal efforts against SAP. It's important to recognize that all parties agree that an independent assessment is a critical next step to moving forward. It's simply the timing at which it should occur that is in question. We urge the committee to reconsider its recommendation to sacrifice the state's legal position for an assessment. With adequate funding, we are confident that both legal and assessment efforts can be completed in a way that manages risk. If the committee wishes to proceed with an assessment sooner and manage these risks, the SCO would recommend moving forward with the assessment in a 2-staged approach. We envision stage 1 could begin sooner and would result in answers to questions such as, is SAP the right software fit for California? For example, a fit gap analysis could be performed to determine if SAP or any other ERP could accommodate the state's business practices as they are today. Also, in stage 1, a determination could be made as to whether SAP platform developed is salvageable. Stage 2 would follow and include an inward-focused project assessment as well as developing solutions and a go-forward strategy. To this end, the SCO is working with the California Technology Secretary to develop a governance model for a staged assessment. We suggest that a steering committee be established and be made up of multiple state agencies such as the California Technology Agency, FTB, DGS, OSI, Department of Finance. The steering committee would be responsible for developing and managing the scope for the independent assessment. The steering committee approach would bring multiple entities and perspectives, including those that have implemented successful projects. and this system would smartly manage the process to best meet the state's goals with minimizing risk and not undermining the state's legal position. We recognize this committee has many unanswered questions and trepidation in continuing to commit resources to this project. We are glad to work with your staff to draft budget bill language to include authorization from the JLBC and to ease concerns in proceeding with funding our proposal beyond the 2 months that staff recommends. Thank you.
Anything further from the Controller's Office? Finance?
Oscar Chavez with Finance. We agree with the Controller's Office that there is a need for legal support costs to protect the state's interest. In terms of the assessment, we do agree that an assessment will be needed at some point in time. However, we think it would be premature to do it at this time. They need to focus on other issues, like, for example, the reconciliation of the payroll and taking care of vendors. And once that's done, then they will have better data to do the assessment. Once they've figured out what went wrong with the system so far. And then at that time they can look at the existing system and also at other alternatives to decide how to proceed with this project.
Finance? Any comment?
Lourdes Morales with LAO. After reviewing the administration's proposal, we recommend approving the requested resources for reconciliation efforts referred to as Do the Math and legal efforts. We also recommend additional resources for an assessment of the 21st Century Project. The staff recommendation in the agenda addresses our most critical concern by adding an assessment and makes other additional changes. Our recommendation is based on the following three key findings. First, reconciliation is rightfully a priority. Accurate and timely management of pay and other employee compensation activities is critical. Failure to administer these functions due to technical failures of the MyCalPay system resulted in economic disruption for state employees and vendors. For these reasons, reconciliation, that is identifying and correcting the errors of the MyCalPay system, is a critical activity. Second, an assessment of the 21st Century Project is absent from the administration's proposal. As the State Controller's Office indicated in their opening remarks, they intend to delay the assessment of the 21st Century Project. According to the State Controller's Office, an inward assessment done while legal issues remain unresolved could compromise the state's legal efforts. We caution against a delayed assessment for 2 reasons. First, a delayed evaluation of the 21st Century Project may be of decreased value. That is because of the difficulty in identifying lessons learned after staff has left the project, which would happen naturally over time. Second, a timely assessment will move the state towards a modernized payroll system more quickly, reduce the length of time the state is dependent on the aged legacy system, and thereby reduce the risk of a significant legacy system disruption in future years. In addition, the legislature may wish to weigh the possible benefits of a favorable legal outcome against the importance of capturing lessons learned. The state's other ongoing IT projects may prove more successful if they benefit from the analysis of the 21st Century Project's failure, a value to the state that, while uncertain, is potentially large given the $5 billion IT portfolio. To be clear, the assessment I refer to was described in detail in our March analysis of the project. The evaluation includes review of the SAEP software, potential simplifications of state payroll practices, an evaluation of various payroll alternatives and their feasibility, as well as an assessment of the technology oversight entities. Third, the legacy payroll system is the only option going forward. Our review of the 21st Century Project's history and complexity, as well as the state's experience with other large IT projects, suggests the state must rely on the legacy systems for many years following the start of a thorough project assessment. Continued long-term dependence on an already 30-year-old system increases the state's risk of financial penalties should the system fail. An assessment, in our view, marks the first step towards procurement, development, implementation, and ultimately the modernization of the state's payroll system. In closing, I would like to clarify that there are 3 proposals being discussed today. The administration's proposal, which requests resources for reconciliation and legal efforts. Our proposal, which recommends adding an assessment to the administration's proposal. And the staff's proposal, which includes the assessment but rejects the request for legal resources at this time and recommends redirecting the associated legal savings towards the assessment. assessment. Thank you.
Let me just say this. As you may know, we're going to be doing our own assessment of this project starting in a few weeks. So it might make sense for the Controller's Office to begin its assessment so we can have a more informed dialogue when we begin that process. Secondly, I've been informed that we have about $5 billion invested or soon to be invested in IT projects in the state of California. And we've somehow established a track record that demonstrates that we generally don't do it very well. So this assessment that the Controller's Office should be doing, and I'm sure will do soon, stands to benefit the entire state of California and to inform us as to what we should be doing on a go-forward basis as we tackle these complicated IT projects. So I would certainly encourage that we step out rather smartly on this assessment and that it be as thorough as possible and that it come up with recommendations, goals and objectives, sort of a pathway forward for IT projects in the future. Unfortunately, it's the Controller's Office that's going to have to do this, but we don't always choose the paths that we have to walk down, and you are already starting down one. If I could start, if my colleagues will allow me to start by asking a couple questions on the proposal itself. And I note that of the money that about $4 million, 3.9 and change, is requesting 40 one-year limited term positions within the Payroll Services Division. Can you talk to me about what these positions are going to do? My understanding, and correct me if I am wrong, is that we have about 1,300 employees that were the guinea pigs on the system using the new computer system, and those employees had their payroll or benefits, all or both or nothing, sort of messed up, for want of a better term, when the payroll was run using the new system in the test phase. And my further understanding is one of the things that we need to accomplish is we need to take these 1,300 employees and we need to make things right for them, which I assume means taking their payroll for what, about 16 pay periods? It was about 8 months, wasn't it? So taking their payroll for about 16 pay periods, and I assume running it through the old legacy system to see what that system generates, and then reconciling the two pay scenarios, right? So if I take these 40 positions, and again, this is a lawyer doing math in public, but if I assume 2,080 hours in a year, work hours in a year, and I come up with about 83,000 hours, man hours, and I divide that by 1,300 employees, I get about 64 hours of work per employee. So there must be something else here that I don't know about, because that seems a little excessive to do a payroll reconciliation per employee.
Yes, sir. Actually, the way the proposal breaks down is that about 24 of those positions are actually dedicated to the reconciliation and stabilization efforts. The remainder comprise, in our proposal, support for the legal and project administrative support.
So that's still about 35 hours or so, and I didn't do the math, but approximately 35 man-hours of work per employee to reconcile 16 pay periods, when I assume all we're doing is feeding numbers through a legacy system and generating a duplicate payroll. Am I right?
Tony Davidson, SCL. Let me try and address that for you. It's a little more complex than that. If we could simply get a readout or a report out of MyCalPays, the SAP system, that told us what employees were paid, it would be a far simpler thing to accomplish. Because of the complexities of the system and the way that the errors occurred, for example, leave balances that were taken were actually paid out. When the next payroll cycle came around, In between that, the money had been pulled back out of a bank account electronically, and then the system's trying to correct it as it goes forward. So just trying to determine initially how and what people were actually paid is a complex situation for a large volume of employees that we don't even actually know how much they were paid, if it was paid accurately. So the determination there, once we get that data, we can reconcile that. Ultimately, it will come down to a comparison, but not all of the data moves over one-to-one from the MyCalPay system back to legacy. So it's not a very straightforward methodology just to when we say we're going to move it back and run a payroll for the same pay period.
Well, I would assume you wouldn't rely on the system that we've just failed to do any migration, and that you would re-input data based on a point in time where the shift was made from the legacy system to the new system, start there, re-input the pay data based on hours worked, benefits accrued, benefits taken, et cetera. So isn't this system, or didn't this system generate a payroll report payday by payday of what transpired, so that I could look under a master report, so that I could look under Jane Doe and figure out that the system just ripped 22 hours of vacation out of her vacation account and paid her $2,000 less deductions, and properly or improperly?
It does generate a report. I can't really explain in detail that could we actually pull that information out of it. There were checks and balances put into it, but a lot of the issue along the way was determining the accuracy of the payroll.
Wow. Well, it just seems like, we can move down this list. It just seems to me that the number of positions and the hours projected to be devoted to each employee's payroll reconciliation over a fairly limited time, where we start with a known, and we're going to start again with a known, and we have an unknown in the middle, but presumably we have reports about that unknown. It ought to not take a week.
So we are going back with source documentation, as you suggested, to the legacy system. But in terms of the process and the methodology to go through this, and this is essentially uncharted waters. We have not done this before, and a methodology doesn't necessarily exist to do this. This is a reconciliation effort that we've had to recreate or develop because of a failed system.
Well, talk to me about the $3.58 million for external consulting services, including costs associated with seeking outside legal counsel, external payroll reconciliation consultants, that one in particular, and project management consultants. What does all that mean?
The proposal included about $1.6 million for payroll reconciliation consultants. And basically what we, like Tony said, we're kind of in uncharted territory here. We know that some of these errors that we need to figure out in reconciliation efforts are going to be very, very complex, and that the state staff are simply not going to have the knowledge of SAP to be able to perform these reconciliations on these most complex cases. So we plan to hire a consultant to help us work through those most complex cases. Along the way, we will be learning ourselves how to best address some of the less complex cases of reconciliation. And so that we'll be learning from them as we go along. That was about $1.6 million. We had $1 million in the proposal for outside legal counsel services to help defend the state against the legal efforts against SAP. And we had about $1 million for project advisors. These are advisors that we've had on the project since day one, and they provide expertise in the areas of business requirements, configuration, customization of SAP, and they were going to help us in both to do the math reconciliation efforts as well as in support of the legal efforts. They have a broad breadth of knowledge and history about the MyCalPay project itself as well as SAP.
So again, that's not our job to jump in the middle of your agency administration, because I you've seen my math today, so I wouldn't be able to do it. But, I mean, are we attempting to work with a system that's failed? Is that what we're trying to do? I mean, wouldn't we start from the last payroll period that we used with the legacy system, and wouldn't we pick up with the legacy system and then sort of go back and re-input data and run payroll for each of the 16 periods? Because we know what people make, right? And we know what benefits they accrue, and the reports should tell us what, I would hope, what leave people took. Or am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And that's part of the equation. That's to determine what they should have been paid through the legacy, right? And the complication is determining exactly what they were paid out of MyCalPAYS to do the reconciliation. We need to know what you should have been paid through legacy, which is what you just explained. And then we also need to understand exactly what they were paid from MyCalPAYS. And that's where we need the expertise in the SAP system and what actually transpired there.
And then if I could just ask one, if my colleagues will indulge me, one final question. Has to do with the $4.93 million for data center service costs, data center service costs, and information technology costs, which represent the funds necessary to receive data center services and infrastructure requirements. And then there's another $2.266 million for payment of data center costs to the Office of Technology related to the suspension of the 21st Century Project. Ma'am, can you address that for me?
Certainly. The $4.9 million that you refer to is estimated to be the first 6 months of costs associated with the data center, and that is essentially the costs OTEC will charge us to maintain the MyCalPAYS system as a system of record for this time period that we need for it to be available for us to access data from in order to do the reconciliation effort, and as well as to answer any questions that may result through mediation or a legal effort. We recognize that there is going to come a point in time where we can seriously scale back the system itself, and we may not incur such high costs from the California Technology Agency, or OTEC. And so what we did was we asked to have another couple $1 million set aside for those months 6 through 12 in case we aren't able to downsize as much as we expect to, and we would have access to those funds at that time. So basically the 4.9 represents 6 months, the first 6 months, and the $2 million represents the remaining 6 months. So it does show that we anticipate scaling down over the course of the fiscal year.
Thank you. Colleagues, you've been very patient. Senator Berryhill.
Yeah, thanks. Listen, I'm going to be voting for this measure, and I do look forward to being on the Oversight Committee. So just briefly, what in your opinion is the timeline for completing the assessment, for starters?
Well, we've talked about several different types of assessment. I'm still not clear as I walk away from here exactly what we're talking about. We have worked with the Technology Agency and the Secretary on defining a scope of a staged assessment going forward. And initially what we had discussed was looking at SAP to make a determination, is that the right tool to go forward for California? What's salvageable? And if California were to go forward with that, what would need to be changed, or what recommendations would have to come in play? One of the things that we don't know is, were we 75% of the way there? Were we 90% of the way there? Given the large investment that's been made thus far, we think it's prudent that we make that determination as part of the go-forward strategy. If a multi-stage assessment is going to expand beyond that scope initially, we would have to go back, define very tightly what the scope of the assessment is, engage in a procurement, which will take some time, and then get it going.
Okay. Listen, in this whole thing, we don't know exactly who's at fault or who's done this or that. But what happens if we don't provide sufficient legal counsel? I understand we're shifting some money here, and I ask that question because if SAP is at fault, I mean, at some point in time, don't we want to have sufficient funds to be able to defend the state's position? And could we find ourselves short?
I would think that we would, and I think the swing is probably closer to approximately $200 million. If you look at the 150% of the contract amount with some other funds that weren't actually amended to the contract, for what the state could recover potentially for termination for cause, if we can support that position that they materially breached the contract, that recovery versus if we can't defend that position and we have to take the position that it's terminated for convenience, we could end up paying the full amount of the contract that exists without receiving any more work from SAP, which could be about $50 million. So if you're looking at the range from $50 million paying out to 150 potential recovery, and in that amount would be included the cost to go forward with whatever it takes to implement MyCalPAYS. It's potentially a $200 million swing.
Okay, yeah.
If I may address your question regarding legal resources, our understanding is that the state will begin contractually mandated mediation this June. Legal efforts would begin should the mediation prove unsuccessful. So reevaluating the legal resources at a later date, once we have a better understanding of what legal support demands may be, is a proposal that has merit.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add there for a second, we're fully engaged with council currently as we're driving towards mediation at the end of June.
Okay,
Well, go ahead. You finish, sir?
I'm done.
Lest there be any ambiguity as to what I think an assessment ought to entail, is not necessarily whether SAP has viability, but the assessment ought to, and your assessment ought to focus, and our assessment will focus on the processes that were utilized to procure and implement this information technology project, which should include what went right, what went wrong, what oversight measures were put in place, how were those implemented, were those successful? If you had to do it again, would you do it the same way? I think the LAO has identified in one or more of its memos how the LAO thinks the assessment should go, but you need to identify for us whether there are any legal impediments in the procurement process that interfered with the controller's ability to contract for and field a satisfactory information technology project. Those are just a few of the items that I would suggest that the controller internally take a look at, and I will also suggest this subcommittee will take a look at when we start this hearing process in a few weeks. Any further questions, colleagues? Senator Torres.
On the use of outside consultants to help your employees investigate the process of wrongful payouts or not so wrongful payouts, is that you're assuming that no one in-house knows how to use that new software?
Actually, we apologize for any confusion. The outside legal efforts are...
No, the legal efforts, the consultants.
Right. The consultants for reconciliation, pardon me. Yes, actually, that is true. We, as Tony mentioned, the SAP software and the system, the MyCalPay system, the way it was built is very, very, very complex, and we simply don't have the level of knowledge in-house with state staff to be able to determine some of those errors that were made in the calculations of pay.
So how can we move payroll to a system and begin to utilize the system when we don't have the knowledge of that system?
And when we're talking about payroll consultants here, we're talking about helping us reconcile pay between the MyCalPay system. We are no longer in the MyCalPay system. We have successfully migrated all state controller's office employees over back to the legacy systems. So we are paying fully out of the legacy system at this point.
Again, are we talking about payroll consultants or software consultants?
Payroll consultants.
Okay.
Colleagues, any further questions? Public comment? Do I hear a motion to approve staff recommendation? It's been moved. Call the roll.
Senator Roth?
Aye.
Senator Torres? Senator Berryhill?
Thank you all very much for your patience and for paying attention to us.
Thank you.